To kick off our second half of the general session today, I have the honor of introducing our association president and CEO, Darren Kopic. I've had the pleasure of working with Darren for many years during my board service, and I can tell you that we have an outstanding and impassioned advocate for our industry in Darren. Darren works tirelessly to promote our industry to regulators, legislators, outside groups, and to help tell our story. He and the outstanding team he's assembled do us as members proud as they work to ensure our critical part in the value chain is protected. Please help me welcome to the stage Darren Kopic.
Thanks, boss. Find my clicker. Good morning, everybody. Wasn't Kim Lear terrific? I heard her once before, and she needs to be on our program, so I'm glad she was able to work it out this year, and you're in for a treat when Jones Laughlin gets up here in a few minutes, too. But I want to spend a couple of minutes just kind of talking about where we've been in 2023, where I think we're likely to go in 2024, and kind of where we're focused as your association, where I think maybe you need to be thinking about some stuff if you're not already thinking about it in the year to come. So quickly run over a few issues that we've been working on in 2023. Like anything in Washington, most of them are not finished. So we're partway through the process, but we're not all the way there on some of these, and the Farm Bill is a good example. The key thing that we're trying to achieve in the 2024, 2025, whatever it becomes, Farm Bill, is a provision that would allow your CCAs, your Certified Crop Advisors, to be considered as third-party service providers under NRCS conservation regulations without jumping through additional hoops. They've already got the CCA, what more do they need? And yet, so that will now enable your folks to be able to help farmers with conservation plans, and more importantly, perhaps for you, to access the resources that are provided to NRCS to pay for that service, because that hasn't been available to you before. So we and several others are working to try to get that into the Farm Bill. When they ever finally get it passed, I think it's in good shape. I talked to the ranking member on the Senate side just a couple of weeks ago about it, and it sounds like both parties, both sides of the hill, were in good shape whenever the final bill does move. So making progress there. Richard on our team probably spends more time on driver issues than just about anything else that we work on. And we continue to plug away at this. We were one of the prime drivers a couple of years ago in getting what's called a young driver apprenticeship program into the transportation bill, which would allow a CDL driver who is 18 years of age to cross state lines. Right now, the federal regs require you to be 21 if you drive across that imaginary line, but you can operate within your state at 18. And so we thought, we've got this driver shortage. Why don't we try to figure out a way to expand that pool and let people cross the state line if they've got their CDL? So DOT gets the authority in the law. They roll out this pilot program, and then for some unbeknownst reason, decide that in order for you to participate in this program with DOT, you also have to be in an apprenticeship program with the Department of Labor, which adds more cost, more paperwork, more administrative headache, and zero benefit for anyone. And so the result is predictable. We don't know of any ag retailer who has decided to sign up in this program, right, Richard? Not a one, because it's become so difficult to get in. And so he's trying to work with DOT to get them to move away from that, but that's kind of where that issue stands. We continue to work on it, but we've got a little unexpected obstacle in the form of this extra hoop to jump through. The other one we're working on is the hours of service exemption for agriculture. Each state has to adopt that individually. So there's not a uniform federal standard for that exemption for ag from hours of service. And so each state either makes the decision to do it or not to do it. They might have their own planting and harvesting window, so that one state would apply between these 2 months and another state next door might apply all 12 months of the year, just depending on how they define it. And so what Richard's trying to accomplish on that issue is to just say, look, it's January 1 to December 31, no matter what state you're in. And so if your state adopts the exemption, then it's going to apply in any month. Haven't got that done yet, but that's a program, a priority that we're working on. I heard a briefing recently about some of the new overtime pay, and especially an H-2A pay restriction that the Department of Labor is now working on. It was actually kind of a terrifying presentation at an Ag CEO Council about a month ago. Here's one of the things that I think will impact those of you that use H-2A labor. The rule they're talking about now would require that if you have someone, let's say you've hired someone to be a fruit picker, and they're paid at a certain wage rate, but you decide one day out of the year to have that person, instead of picking fruit, maybe they're going to go do some welding in the shop, or maybe they're going to move a truck or do something else that is at a higher pay rate. The rules that the federal government is now proposing would require you to change that person's pay rate for every hour they work to whatever that highest number is. So even if they only work 1 hour a year at the higher wage rate job, they're going to get that higher wage rate for every single hour they work, no matter what they were doing for you during the year. And it gets better. The rules also say that everybody in your operation that's in an H-2A category must be paid the same rate for the same work. So if worker A now has a pay raise because they did 1 hour work of welding, everybody else on the farm is going to get that same raise for all the work that they do. So you can imagine the kind of impact this is going to have on industries that rely on H-2A labor. And we're not the lead on this one, but we're certainly involved singing in the chorus with Farm Bureau and several other groups trying to head this issue off. Great presentation yesterday on the EPA herbicide strategy. All I'll say today is that it's important that EPA has some way to demonstrate that they're complying with the Endangered Species Act, or our entire pesticide portfolio is at risk from litigation. Having said that, they've gone way too far with some of the proposals that they've got out in the herbicide strategy and in the vulnerable species pilot program. In that vulnerable species program, just in my home state of Oregon, they've set aside almost the entire western half of the Willamette Valley as what they call a pesticide use limitation area for one species. The species doesn't reside in anywhere near that size of an area, but the restriction is not just you can't use this particular pesticide, or you have to use it at this rate or with these restrictions. It's you cannot apply, period, anything. And the area that they've drawn on the map includes Oregon State's research farm. So they've gone to great extremes to make this really unworkable, to the point that even the local person from the Center for Biological Diversity has said they've gone too far. You heard that right. Center for Biological Diversity said they've gone too far. So EPA's listening. This is our chance to get comments. The comment period is closed, and we did submit, but we're still working with the agency, talking with them consistently about trying to get this back on the rails so that there's a strategy that we can live with that still provides the ESA compliance that we have to have at the end of the day. A couple of good news items in recent weeks. Good court decisions on both chlorpyrifos and glyphosate. California can no longer require a cancer warning, a Prop 65 warning on a glyphosate label because the science doesn't justify it. Woohoo! We won one. And then the decision was also handed down from a court that the decision to vacate the chlorpyrifos registration that was done through a different channel than FIFRA was not adequately considered. So I think they remanded it back to EPA to have them look at it. That doesn't mean we can go use the product tomorrow. EPA still needs to reactivate the label before we can do that, but at least the total prohibition dead-end situation that we were looking at with that product isn't there anymore. This is one that's important specifically for retailers, and that is that we have, for a long time, back before even I came to ARA, the organization has opposed import duties on farm inputs. And the reason's very simple. From a retailer's point of view, our benefit is to have access to a multiple supply of sources with as few impediments in the way as possible. And so that's the principle on which we advocated that. Now, we have some supplier members who weren't necessarily supportive or aligned with that position, and that's why we have our own voices, but it's also why we have all of those people around our board table so that we can have those conversations and understand, hey, on this one particular issue, our middle name is retailer, we're going to advocate the retailer's position, but on the other 99% of the issues that we work together on, we're continuing to be aligned, we're going to continue to cooperate and move this industry together forward. But that was one of the issues that we were happy with the results for retailers, how those came out. We continue to provide information and services to keep you informed during the past year. Hopefully you've been able to benefit from those, from newsletters and social media posts and the magazine and all kinds of other things that we do to keep you informed. And I usually this time of year talk about help desk cases that we've resolved. We have what we call a DC help desk where a member can call in as part of your membership and you can ask regulatory questions like, if I've got this quantity of sodium chloride in my warehouse, do I need to report that to DHS or is it below the de minimis that I don't need to report? And so questions like that you can call in and ask our regulatory team. We've answered from all kinds of different transportation regulations, fertilizer storage, pesticide storage, on and on. If they don't know the answer, they'll find it and get it back to you. And that's included in your membership. So 8 of those we did this year. One of them was on a rail issue, I think, for one of the members where some competition issues were at play. Railroad was threatening to pull out service to where their facility was. And we were able to engage STB and open some doors for them on that issue. So let's talk about the future a little bit, where we're going from here. We decided since we were close to Cape Canaveral, we would use a space theme for this year's conference. Figured if we put Mickey Mouse on there, I'd get sued by Disney, so I didn't want to risk that. But here are some issues that I think we're going to be focused on, and you probably are, for the next few months as well. This issue about people that Kim Lear was talking about, and we've got two other presentations during the week about people, continues to be the most important thing I hear from members. Even before the pandemic, it was, I can't find people at every level of the organization. It doesn't matter if it's warehouse or business leaders or account managers, anybody. I can't find them. One of our members a couple years ago called me at the conference and said, I was planning to come, but I'm short 2 people. One left for this and one was out for COVID. And he says, I'm at the point now where if I can get somebody to pee in a cup, I'll hire him. Maybe you've been there. But it's a continued issue, especially in rural communities where the available pool of people just isn't that big. And so we're going to try to find ways that we can help. One of the things that we do is provide professional development services programs to our members that you can tap your employees into, whether it's the Management Academy that we do with Purdue, whether it's Engage that we do with Corteva that helps you talk about, here's what I do for my job in a community situation like a soccer game or a Kiwanis Club meeting, where people around that table maybe don't understand who you are and what you do and why you do it the way you do it. So those kinds of programs, there's a Navigator 360 program that we offer for self-development, goal setting, and some crisis communication programs. All of those are available to the membership to help you deal with this issue. I think also, though, that automation is going to be part of this. Whether it's a janitorial machine like this that in that picture is in, I think, an Amazon warehouse or a grocery store, but maybe this is going to be the way you do janitorial work in some of your warehouses going forward. If the price point gets down to the point that that makes sense and you don't have to have people do that anymore, you can have a drone do that, or a robot. United Airlines has little robots wandering around the United Club now, collecting your dirty dishes and plates as you're sitting there. I read an article just this week. There's a company in Japan that is creating robot-based harvesting equipment that can go through a cucumber greenhouse, identify the ones that are ripe, and snip them off and pull them off the plant and leave the others that are not ready to be harvested for another trip through the field. So we're moving in this direction, and I know there's a lot of investment in automation that retailers are making. I think that's going to be one key strategy that we have for bridging that gap and trying to get all the labor done that we need to get done when we might not have enough people to do it. Now, here's a free suggestion for the OEMs in the room. We have a big workforce out there that we could recruit if only we designed the controls of the equipment in a little more user-friendly manner. So if we could just make it all look like an Xbox joystick or a PlayStation, we might have a whole lot of people that, oh yeah, I'd like to go kill those weeds because I can zap them with the X button, or whatever it is. So that's free, it's probably worth what you paid for it, but it was just an idea that I had. AI is a big one that I think we're gonna look at going forward. I will tell you that just on a lark, I asked ChatGPT to write my president's report. I said, give me a 700-word Agricultural Retailers Association president's report, and I sat there and watched it in 30 seconds, wrote exactly that, with 5 different main points. I'm not using any of that stuff in this presentation, but it was amazing what it came up with. Now, in the legal world, I know it doesn't do quite as good a job because it invents legal cases out of whole cloth and then cites them as references. So it has some work to do to get it ready. But in our space, I think it's got a couple of applications. We all know that we have mountains of data from farm fields. Years of data, soil types, fertility, planting, you name it, and multiple years. And the challenge for all of us is to try to look at that stack of data and extract from it usable insights so we can go back to the farmer customer and say, here's what we think you ought to do for your micronutrients next year. Or this is the expectation we have for fungicide demand for next year based on what we see weather patterns having been and how they're developing so far. AI can help us do that. It's not going to be the answer. There's always got to be some kind of a human check in there to make sure we're not getting faulty data. But I think AI can help us sort through that. I think it can also help extend the reach of your agronomists. It's not going to replace them, but it can help them decide, out of all this mountain of stuff and all these fields and all these customers, I'm seeing some hot spots here. And so the agronomists can then focus their attention on those kinds of issues, and you may be able to get better bang for your buck, better reach for what you're doing with those. The whole area of biologicals is one where growers are going to have to rely on retailers to figure it out because they do not have time to do it. You just look at the number of biological products that seem to be coming into the market almost on a monthly basis. And there's a lot of good stuff out there, but how do you tell, A, what works and what doesn't, but B, more importantly, on my farm, my weather conditions, my soil types, my climate, my cropping system, what product or products, and it's likely to be more than one, is going to be the final mix that we put together to make this grower receive a benefit. I think AI can help us do that. It's not going to be the answer, but when the challenge is sorting through humongous piles of data, AI is a tool that we can deploy to make that work. Now, there's always watch-outs with AI, and there's watch-outs with other things too, like what we see in Washington. That's kind of what this last slide is about. We have plenty of that going on in DC at the moment, but it's just kind of a watch-out that AI is a great tool. We can use it for several things, but we need to keep an eye on it and make sure that it's not giving us faulty data. Here's an issue that if you haven't read about it, you probably will hear more about it. This is Scope 3 emissions. So several months ago, the Securities and Exchange Commission rolled out a rule that would require publicly traded companies to report what they call greenhouse gas emissions for Scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1, which is in the center of the graphic here, is what you generate in your own business operation. So any emissions that come from your factories or your fields or the things that you're doing as a business, that's Scope 1. Conceptually, at least, that's easily enough to measure. Scope 2 is emissions that come from things that you purchase for your business. So you purchase power, you purchase fuel, you purchase other things to make your business go, essential inputs, but the emissions that are generated when those things are produced count as Scope 2. A little harder to get your arms around, but still theoretically measurable. Scope 3 is everything that's downstream. So after it leaves your facility, after it leaves your warehouse or your manufacturing plant or your farm field, it's all the emissions that happen from the use of that product downstream. And that just boggles my mind of how we'd ever be able to measure that. Not only is it hard to measure, it's going to be prone to double and triple counting because somebody else's Scope 2 emissions will be your Scope 3, your Scope 1 is going to be somebody else's Scope 2, and you end up with a system that only an EU bureaucrat or somebody from the California Air Resources Board would love. incredibly complex. Now, you may think, since this is an SEC rule, it's only going to apply to publicly traded companies. Maybe. They're reconsidering it. We're not sure what they're going to do with the rule yet. But if it does come out and it applies only to publicly traded companies, guess what? How many retailers buy products or services that they sell to growers that come from a publicly traded company? Equipment, fertilizer, crop protection, just about all of it comes, there's a publicly traded company in that chain somewhere. So if that company has to report their Scope 3 downstream emissions, they're going to come to you and say, what are your emissions from your facility? What are the emissions that generate from your grower that's downstream from you? Because they're going to have to report all that in their Scope 3 emissions. So even if the rule doesn't apply to you, you get to play the game anyway. That's why Ag has been pushing back so hard on SEC to try to get agriculture exempted from Scope 3. We're making some traction. I don't think there's been anywhere close to a final decision yet. Gary Gensler, the chairman of SEC, has certainly heard the message, but we're continuing to push back on that because that would be an absolutely unworkable, incredible mess if it came out the way they initially proposed it. So speaking of the policy environment, how do you go about doing that? I mean, this stuff probably starts to give you a headache at some point. It's like, how can I run my business with all this crap going on? That's why you're here. I mean, imagine trying to go to Washington on your own with your own driver issue or your own residue issue or your own ammonia tank issue, trying to advocate for yourself on the legislation or on regulations and trying to get that done for one company in one state, one location, one member of Congress. Here, you join your voices together with others across the country, different cropping systems, different shapes, sizes, different business strategies and organizations, and yet we come up with common unified proposals that we can go advocate for in Washington to the benefit of everyone in the industry. So that's one strategy for managing that environment. Another one is that tonight we will have our ARA dinner and auction. And you have an opportunity during the week to participate in the silent auction through your HandBid app on your phone. The money that's raised from ARA is given to candidates to run their campaigns for people who support agriculture. And so not only are we helping friends get elected or reelected to the Congress, but at times we get essential access to them at critical times in the legislative process because they'll be busy with appointments, you can't get in to see somebody, and you got to talk to the Senate Ag Committee chair about some issue before they do the Farm Bill hearing next week. But it's amazing how many of them will still show up for a $1,000 a plate fundraiser in the morning. And so, yeah, maybe it feels bad and smells weird, but it's the way that we have to get in front of those people when we absolutely have to get in front of them. And so that's why the team is so energetic about raising money for ARA, and that's how we use it. We send members to a lot of those events, but it's an incredibly important tool for us, and that's another way you can be engaged. A third way is helping us with comments. So occasionally we will send out a member alert or an action alert asking you to say, fill out this comment and file these regulatory statements. We draft the comment for you, so the guts of it are all there. But we do ask you to insert not just your name and your email address so that it goes to the right office, but also to include some things from your own business, your own experience, to make it a personal message. Why is that important? When EPA tallies up the number of comments they get on the herbicide strategy, they frequently will say, we got 200 unique comments and we got 18,700 identical postcards from some campaign that some NGO did. Well, if I'm reading comments, I'll go, yeah, saw that one, okay, I'll put that one aside, but I'm going to read the ones that actually somebody put some thought into and customized it so that I can see their message. It's still really easy. You just add a couple of lines, maybe a paragraph, click send, and it's done. Or this week, we sent out a survey about treated seed. So EPA now has a petition in front of them from one of the NGOs to require that if the treated seed, so seed with a pesticide on it, has to go through a separate EPA registration for the finished treated article, even though the pesticide that you put on there as a seed treatment already has a Section 3 label. That's why we had the treated article exemption in the statute in the first place. But there's a petition in there from one of the environmental groups to throw that out and make us go through separate registrations for first the product and then for the treated article once it's been treated. So the survey that we're asking you to help us with is going to help us inform comments. We're going to be sharing that information with the American Seed Trade Association and with CropLife America and coordinating our comments together about that. But that piece of data is going to be really important for us as we put together comments on seed treatment. So that's another way. Another way is to host people at your location. We have a guide that we make available to members about hosting congressional delegations or visits at your facility. And there's no better way to let people know what you do and why you do it and why it's good for the community and the measures you go to keep everybody safe and care for the environment than to invite them in and show them around. It can be a congressional federal person, it can be a state legislator, it can be a regulator, but we encourage you to do that at times when your business schedule will permit it. You know, obviously don't do it in the spring, but in August or in some other time when you might have a little bit of a lull, so to speak, invite somebody out to come visit your operation, and we'll help. Hunter's been involved, I don't know how many different congressional visits during the past few months where we organize, work with the congressional office and help you get all those details put together to host them at your facility. We're looking always for new allies. When you're as small as agriculture is, you've got to have friends in order to leverage those efforts that you make. And so that's what led us to co-locate with CropLife and with TFI. And it's really, I think, yielded some good benefits for us in terms of collaboration. But it's also caused us to reach out further to other maybe non-traditional allies. And in the audience this week, we have some international allies that are here. So my counterparts from Brazil, from Canada, from France, and from Argentina are here. The Australians couldn't make it, they had a conflict. But it's a group of folks that we share information with, and occasionally we actually work a global issue together. So for example, the UN Food Systems Summit that was in September of, I think, 22. We were very concerned that the Europeans were going to drive us to a 50% pesticide reduction, farm to fork kind of a solution in this Food Systems Summit. And so we gathered a bunch of our international allies on the phone. We shared information back and forth. Turns out we were all concerned about it. And the Australians happened to have a meeting with their deputy prime minister 2 weeks later, and they were able to take the data that we were able to share, put that in front of their deputy PM, and we all had a coordinated message that went back to the UN's Food Systems Summit and ended up with a much, much better outcome than we would have had that kind of activity not happened. Now, we can't take credit for the entire outcome of that summit, but lots of activity like ours in other sectors of the economy, all were doing the same thing. And we're going to need to have allies like that to manage global issues going forward. They're going to get more complicated rather than less. Last thing I'll mention here is we just are about to complete, or did complete, I guess, a project with Farm Journal to create what we call a model retailer. So when we go to the Hill, it's really hard to be able to say, well, the impact of this regulatory proposal is going to be X number of dollars and cents on a retail facility, because nobody's facility is the same. And so the idea here is to create one that at least is kind of representative of what a typical facility will look like, and then we can measure those impacts. But then members also can look at that number and the impact that we measure and say, well, they've got 10 CDL drivers in that model location, but we've actually got 27. And so an impact on CDL drivers, you just do the math and figure out what the impact is for you. It's the first time we've really been able to put a number on the value of advocacy work. It's so hard to measure. And so we're hoping this will help communicate that both to members and prospective members, but also to regulators and policymakers on the Hill. A lot of things in your business. I mentioned the biological challenge that we face and the data that we have to get through, the recommendations that customers are going to want. Some of you are looking at risk management offerings to bring to your producers, or different strategies for managing your own risk from various things that are either somewhat in your control or the geopolitical events that are totally out of your control, but you can at least build a little resilience pad into your system in some ways to be prepared for it if it happens. That's going to continue to be an issue, I think. And then finally, bringing new tools into your business. I know you're all doing that, looking for what's an improvement we can make. Everybody I know loves to do ERP upgrades and replacements, right? Those are always pain-free, no headaches, simple, easy. So those kinds of things that you look for just to be able to stay on the front end of technology, because your growers are moving fast there too, as you know. And so sometimes it's a matter of staying ahead of them. Sometimes it's a matter of keeping up with them. There's also business services that are available to you. The most recent one that we put out there is the smart payment system that helps with credit card processing. So if any of you are accepting credit cards for payments, this system will very likely reduce the amount of merchant fees that you're paying out of pocket and remove some data error possibilities from manual data entry and improve your processes as well. So that's a service that we have available for members too. All right, so this probably gives you all a headache. What in the world do I do about this and how do I manage it going forward? Well, that's why you're here. But I wanted to share with you some core values that our team put together. We went through strategic planning a year ago. The board established a new plan last November. And one of the things that we've done at the staff level as an execution exercise, in addition to just kind of setting benchmarks and what we call quarterly rocks, is to determine what are the core values of this organization. And I'm really proud of what the team put together in this area. This is how your staff team sees us, the organization together and the staff team that works for you. We're an organization of integrity. We're one that can adapt and move quickly as we need to. We collaborate and work together with others. We're determined. We don't give up when we first run into the first obstacle. We take initiative. We don't wait for things to happen. We look for opportunities to make things happen. And we're focused totally on the members. So I hope those values that we believe in are obvious to you as members and that you support those and see those acted out in the activities of your staff. Speaking of staff, we have a wonderful, wonderful team that we could not do this without every single one of them. And they're all specialized, they're all very skilled. I'm not going to bring them all up here today, but as you see them in the audience or you see them behind the reg desk or you see them at events, please thank all of them for the work that they do. And kind of as a representative of the team, we've got two people that are hitting employee anniversary milestones this year. Brenna Hawtaw has been with us for 10 years. Richard is now at 20, so he's our long-termer on the staff, been here longer than I have. But I want to bring both of them up here. Have you help me recognize them and let them offer a couple of comments. Richard and Brent, come on up. So I don't have anything to hand to them because they've already received their gift for the employee anniversary. But I'd invite Brand first, if you'd like to make any comments, to please do.
I hate public speaking, so I'm just going to say thank you, Darren, and thank all of the members of ARA.
Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Darren. It's been an honor and privilege working for ARA these last 20 years. So you see that picture, probably I'm a little maybe heavier and not quite as young as I was. Back then I had daughters that are now graduated from college and a freshman in college. So one was not even born when I started working at ARA. But it's been a pleasure. There's a lot of great people, as Joe and Toby said, in our industry. There's no better industry to work for. If any of the industries to be involved in, agriculture and what you do is the one critical thing for an industry, for anybody. You need food and sustenance and energy, and it's important. And so I view this as, I've got my own family. I view the ARA family and other core values we don't have listed in there. Is family is another key thing. Jack Eberspacher Ward, he's the one that hired me. So I think I spent more time or as much time with the ARA staff in events like this than my actual family. So is it an extension of that? And I'm honored that Darren has kept me on, and it's a privilege to work here.
Great. Thank you both. I knew Bryn didn't like public speaking, so I'm going to probably pay for that in some form going forward. That's okay. Terrific team, and thank you both for your dedication to the organization. So I'll wrap up with this. This is our updated mission statement that we came out with strategic planning with. Didn't change a whole lot from where we were before. There still talks about freedom to operate and about advocating and educating. But the one thing that it changed is why we do it. And that is so that we can provide safe and plentiful food for all. We didn't have that as part of the mission statement before. But it kind of gives you the long-term focus of, yeah, we work on freedom to operate, yeah, we work on these other things, but the reason we do it is so that everybody can have a plentiful and safe food supply, and that's why we're here. Thank you for the privilege of being your president. I really love working for this group, and I look forward to doing so for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate your leadership, and I'm always amazed by what you and a relatively small staff can do and how those ripples can be felt throughout the industry and amongst our members. So appreciate your leadership.